The pre-sale for badges to the Rose City Comic Con is underway. It's coming to the Oregon Convention Center September 6th through 8th, and this year's lineup is stacked. Hayden Christensen, aka Anakin Skywalker, will be there, so will Rosario Dawson from movies like Death Proof, Sin City, and Men in Black 2, and Simon Pegg from Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Freaking Simon Pegg! Plus a ton of cast members from your favorite shows and movies, along with your favorite comic book artists, authors, and so much more. Go buy your badges now at rosecitycomiccon.com. Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about a wrongful death lawsuit faulting the city for failing to keep a man's alleged killer off the streets, the sheriff's office refusing to enforce the city's camping ban, and an update on the devastating wildfires ravaging our state and what it means for us in the metro area. And joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup are Oregonian breaking news and courts reporter Zane Sparling and our very own producer Julia Fiaioni. It's Friday, August 2nd. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Zane, Julia, thank you for hanging out with me this morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for the invite, Claudia.
Okay.
All right.
Zane, I know this is a big day for you because you can finally stop crossing the days off since your last appearance, which was 33 days ago.
Whoa.
All right.
Honestly, it's been a journey. It's been a sojourn. I've lived, I've laughed, I loved, I gained 10 pounds, and I'm back, and I'm so glad to be here.
And you got a haircut.
Yeah.
Which we can all see, and we love it.
That's why I had to mention it.
Are you regretting starting this bit, Zane?
No, I mean, I want to mark the rest of my life through CityCast. I want to be... I want my tombstone just to say, you know, he was on CityCast this many times. That's it. No name.
Oh my God. For all of our new listeners, today is the day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. But before we jump into the news, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners can get to know our guests just a little better. And since we're in the middle of our outdoor eating season, I'm talking specifically like fairs and festivals of every kind, today's opening question is what your favorite Oregon festival/fair food is.
Zane, you look eager.
I can go first. If you need more time to gather your thoughts, I can go first.
Please.
All right. Well, to me, nothing says I'm at a fair and I'm ready to party like freshly fried dough. I'm talking like elephant ears, you know, funnel cakes, fry breads, donuts, churros. I can go on. What about you guys?
I think for me, that's a second because, like, I'm not always in the mood for a funnel cake. It really depends on, like, I don't know, where my sweet tooth's at. But recently, I had a pretty memorable corn dog, I must say. And I'm talking those, like, massive, like, forearm length corn dogs. I'm sad to say I did get absolutely gouged by the price. It was a $20 corn dog.
No,
but
sir.
It was covered in honey, and I think that's the only thing that saves it. Although, I don't know, $20 is a lot.
$20?
No.
It was, yeah.
I would have slapped someone. If someone was like, that's 20 bucks, it would have just been like,
maybe you should
shot.
slap me.
No, I'm not. All right, Zane.
I personally do like the pretzels. I had a pretty good pretzel. I think it was at a Thorns game recently. I mean, the danger with the pretzel is you just get... Okay, I learned a secret. They're going to say, do you want salt or no salt? And you're going to think, oh, I want a little bit of salt. But that's not what they're offering you. They're offering you Saltmageddon or nothing. And you got to go nothing.
Saltmageddon.
It's so true. And who wants that much salt? Do you know what I mean?
Me.
Like, you're just like,
that's
who's
a part
doing
of the
that?
appeal.
No,
that's
Julia.
the best part.
Julia, this is where you're wrong.
That's how you get your $20 back, is in the salt.
You just scrape it off and use it for the rest of the month.
You're salt mining over here. This is your side hustle.
All right, on to the news of the week. Zane, what are you looking at?
So I've got a pretty interesting lawsuit story that we just wrote about here in the Oregonian. It's a $2 million lawsuit that was filed by the family of a man who was murdered back in Old Town. It was Mark Anthony Davis. He was 53 and he died. And the suspect in his killing, who's 22, was arrested 2 days before this fatal stabbing where he allegedly assaulted someone who was using a walker. basically there was a previous incident. The person is booked and released. They're back on the streets. Allegedly, they then kill someone. And now the family of that victim is suing. And it is, of course, a terrible tragedy when anything like this happens. It really showcases the tough decisions that we're going to talk about today with booking and when someone should be kept in jail. It's tough to say because we don't have any crystal balls in the justice system. We don't know what people are going to do when they're released from custody. And in this case, what the accusations are is that they went out and they killed someone. It's a horrifying thing. And I don't want to get into booking procedures too much, but I know it's been in everyone's minds right now. And it's a really tough question of, should people be in jail when constitutionally they are innocent until proven guilty?
Yeah, but here's the reason why this lawsuit really does open up a lot of questions that if this is a precedent for other lawsuits of this nature, because as you stated, his previous arrest, there was video evidence, but the arresting officer didn't gather that evidence and booked him as a misdemeanor. And here's the deal. I don't know if that's up to the police officer, if the police officer goes to wherever the booking and says, this is what I got, and they're just like, misdemeanor, you know what I mean? But that's who they're suing. They're suing the actual arresting officer for not gathering enough information, because ultimately this man should have not been out 2 days later because his previous criminal action was considered a felony, and you don't get released with a felony. If I'm correct, right, Zane?
That's right. So it depends, of course, right? There's different standards. And the way we do booking now, as we've talked about on the show before, we don't do it based on some human person who is interviewing you, right? It's not like Blade Runner where a human sits down at a desk and decides whether or not you're going to be let out of jail. What happens is they have a set rule book. It's almost like an algorithm of criteria, right? So, for instance, if you've committed a serious felony, the rules are just going to slot you into that do not release category. Whereas if you have committed a misdemeanor like breaking a window or you get caught trespassing on someone's property, the rules are just automatically going to say this guy, he gets booked, he gets told, hey, you need to come back in a few days for your next hearing, and that's it. It's meant to be objective and treat everyone equally. Of course, the downside is that if you input the wrong information into these standards, then you get the wrong result, right? So in this case here, the issue is not that this wasn't a very serious assault. It's they didn't really know how bad the incident was when they booked him, right? If they had known how bad that assault had been, presumably the suspect would have then stayed in jail for a couple more days, or at least until a judge really could have, at least heard the evidence.
And the reason why it's a big deal is not because they didn't know, it's because they chose not to seek further with readily available videotapes that would have told them exactly what happened, if I'm understanding correctly.
That's right. I mean, this is a really tough thing to talk about. I always think the metaphor that I think about is that when it comes to the justice system, these things are going to happen inevitably because they're always playing this game. It's like I could win a game of basketball against LeBron James if the rules were I win if I score a single point and we play until I win, right? The justice system is always going to lose because eventually someone's going to let out who shouldn't have been let out. And then something like this will happen. And it's a tragedy. I mean, it's horrible. But at the same time, I mean, you could solve a lot of crime by simply locking up, I don't know, everyone. If every single person was in jail, there would be no crime, but you can't do that.
Zane, I did have a question. Speaking more broadly, I wonder about how common these types of lawsuits are. And if people going and suing for things like this has become more common as like the perception of crime at least has gotten worse in the city, people feel more emboldened to like accuse someone of doing something wrong about it, or if this has always been a thing and this is just one of those major cases that people are keeping their eye on.
It does happen. This isn't the first time that the city of Portland has been sued, of course, but
Yeah, it's not.
Anecdotally, as the court reporter for the Oregonian, I've covered a couple of different trials in this year where the defense has often claimed that the investigation wasn't thorough, right? So we're looking back now towards 2020 through the pandemic, the past couple of years, right? When there wasn't necessarily a surge of all types of crime, but the murder rate did go up. And murders require a lot of investigation. And there was actually a trial I covered just, I think, last month where the person was acquitted in part because they hadn't collected all of the surveillance footage. They'd gotten some of it, but not every angle. And the defense said, hey, the state has not provided me with the full facts. How can I prove that my client is innocent or guilty if I don't have all the camera angles? And the jury said, you're right. And they let the guy go and he's acquitted. So I don't know the specifics of this case beyond what we can find in the public record. I do know that the suspect, the person who's now charged with that murder, they did get sent to the state hospital. So that means they had some serious concerns about this man's ability to, help in his own defense and be mentally competent. When you have people who are committing crimes, again, allegedly, because they are mentally ill, it's tough because we could do a whole podcast episode about the lack of mental health beds and lack of mental health services.
But we could just talk about this legally.
Yeah.
So who decides if a crime is a misdemeanor or a felony? The arresting officer, or is that in booking?
It's both. I mean, when the police arrest you, right, it's on suspicion of. So the police decide what they think you've done.
Okay.
They then forward the case to the prosecutor, right? And the prosecutor looks at the evidence and they decide, no, actually you didn't do this. Or maybe they think, well, we could bump up the charges, right? Or they just decline to prosecute or whatever it may be. In this case, we didn't get that far, right? Because they lodged him on this misdemeanor assault charge instead of a felony assault. And then the algorithm went into effect. It said misdemeanor assault. All right, you're out.
But this isn't an isolated incident. I know that we were just like, oh, well, the law, it's not perfect, whatever. But this thing keeps happening quite a lot in Portland. Like there's another suspect that's been threatening, stabbing, and attacking people in Portland for like 7 years. You might know his name, Zane, because he's been covered in the Oregonian. It's Carol McClendon. Your colleague Maxine Bernstein wrote about him back in 2020 when he stabbed an off-duty Portland fire lieutenant who was celebrating his wedding anniversary inside a bar near Providence Park. Now, I know he was arrested for that crime, but I'm not sure for how long of a sentence he received. I couldn't find that info with like the limited databases I have, Google. But just know a few days ago, he attacked another person in my neighborhood, a shop owner. And since 2017 in Portland, he's had this rap sheet. And we're just wondering, like, does he have to kill someone for our city's law enforcement bureaus to do anything? Will like another lawyer have to sue the city? Because according to Maxine's article from 4 years ago, his court record stated he had 9 felony convictions, 13 misdemeanor convictions, and 25 probation violations. But he's out, and we know he was arrested. We don't know if he was let go.
Jeez, that is...
So what I'm saying is like, it's just not like, oh, I scored 1 point against LeBron. You know what I mean? I'm like, there's an issue here. There's like a problem that needs to get fixed because I feel like Portland is feeling like they're getting kicked while they're down. There's just this miscommunication between the police, the prosecutors, what's going on, and everyone's blaming each other. And it's like, we are the ones who get screwed at the end.
Welcome back to CityCast.
Whenever you come on, Zane, we're just like, we're going to save all of the legal stories so we can ask Zane every question.
Well, the good news is I don't have a law degree, and if you take my advice, you're going to be fine. You're going to be just good.
I do find it interesting that the lawsuit just hones in on a police officer for not doing his job. I'm wondering if that's some kind of legal strategy, Ultimately, whatever happens with this lawsuit, the public will have to pay it out because that's how that works. They don't have like non-taxpayer money for this. And I just personally think that once a public servant causes a lawsuit that has to get paid out, they should no longer have a job. I don't care what your role is. I don't care if you're just like, the janitor, whatever. Like if you caused a lawsuit, imagine, Zane, you caused a lawsuit at the Oregonian. They're going to keep old Zane around? And I'm talking like negligence, not like,
Libel.
Someone's mad at you and, like the regular journalistic lawsuits. But we're not going to get kept around. So why do public servants get to be kept around?
Yeah. Well, I think the answer is union. And once Julia and I unionize against you, Claudia, you will be causing lawsuits left and right.
How did I get roped into this?
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, more headlines of the week. There are so many meal kits and food delivery service options out there, but imagine having your own personal chef that does all the planning, shopping, cooking, and even cleaning. They also take your dietary goals and restrictions in mind. Every meal customizable and made fresh to order in your own kitchen. And on top of all that, it's affordable, priced similarly to grabbing takeout. Sounds a little too good to be true, right? Well, Chefs for Senior is doing just that. They're a one-of-a-kind in-home meal preparation service that doesn't just deliver meals, they provide the chef. And it's not just for seniors, they're also serving those recently discharged from the hospital, new parents, and those who would rather just have someone else do the cooking so they can focus on the things they'd rather do. Check it out for yourself at chefsforseniors.com/portland.or. That's chefsforseniors.com/portland.or. So this week, I'm looking at a few articles and public statements from city and county bureaus about how Mayor Ted Wheeler seems to be having trouble getting the county to actually enforce the camping ban that the city passed a few months ago, specifically Multnomah County Sheriff Nicole Morrissey O'Donnell. If you guys don't remember, on the 1st of July, our revised camping ban, which was unanimously approved by the Portland City Council in May of this year, allows the city to fine or jail people who refuse shelter when it's available. And according to the article by Willamette Week's Sophie Hoobie Peel, who broke the story, this past Friday, the Portland Police Bureau made their very first arrest of an unhoused man who allegedly wouldn't comply with the city's new camping restrictions. The assumption is he supposedly refused alternative shelter. And when the Portland police officers took the man to get booked in the county jail, because again, just the city does not have jails. It goes to the county jail. The sheriff's office refused to book him. And a spokesman for the sheriffs told Willamette Week, the sheriff's office only books for misdemeanors and felonies, not for violations of city ordinances, which I have so many more questions about that, Zane. But later that afternoon, Multnomah County Sheriff Nicole Morrissey O'Donnell posted a formal statement on the Sheriff County site, and here's a quote. As the elected official charged with managing the jail, I believe we need to utilize the correction system as a place for people who pose a genuine danger to the public, and that does not include individuals whose only offense is living unsheltered. So this feels like a little bit more political than just like, we don't do city ordinances. But I mean respectfully to Sheriff Morrissey O'Donnell, the county jails are barely even holding people who do pose a genuine danger to the public. But I see her point. It's a point many others in the community have raised. But of course, Mayor Ted Wheeler is really annoyed because he claims we agreed on this. Lady, we've been talking for a year and a half. You said, and he quoted, you said we had open booking. And according to the sheriff's department, they were just like, what you think is open booking isn't open booking. What we meant by open booking, you know, the last time we spoke was that we started booking misdemeanors and felonies and stuff from the state law, not from city ordinances. So, of course, everyone's like, well, is there a written agreement? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, how did this city ordinance get through so quickly and the county wasn't on board? And Mayor Ted Wheeler was just like, there was no written agreement between the sheriff's office and the city that laid out the expectation that the sheriff would jail violators of the city's ordinance because, and this is a quote here, cities do not typically need to get agreements in writing confirming that their sheriff will enforce the law. So what are you guys thinking here?
I think it's funny that throughout this back and forth, there's been a lot of arguing over semantics when the point is the sheriff just does not agree with the ban, period. It's what that boils down to. And for that to not be clear from the start, for it to be a surprise, is suspicious to me. I almost feel like on either end, they must have been anticipating this on some level to some degree. Like, this can't be a surprise on both ends. They may just be trying to back themselves up at this point, but there had to have been something going on before this.
I mean, the big question up front is if the county doesn't jail anyone for city ordinance violations, then why do we have city ordinances? Is this revised camping ban like the only city ordinance that involves jail? Are the rest just fine-based at this point then?
Yeah, I mean, I think first I want to just note that I had my microphone muted when you said hoobie dinging, so the laughter that was resounding on my screen did not actually get captured. So I do want to say, just for our listeners, you probably heard this story or saw it, maybe not at Willamette Week, maybe you saw it in some other outlet. This was a scoop that they had, and we should give them some credit for figuring this out because this was a huge deal. I mean, I think for one, Morrissey O'Donnell, right, who was essentially the, I don't want to say handpicked, but certainly the heir apparent from Sheriff Reese, right? Morrissey O'Donnell worked for the former sheriff when Mike Reese decided he wasn't going to run again, or maybe he was termed out. She was basically the heir apparent and has came very low profile since then, and suddenly is just bursting into this conflagration of conflict, right? Because, I mean, it's true, right, that like, that they do have a policy about not putting someone in jail if they have too many parking tickets, right? That's another example of like a violation. I think another example would be, fireworks ban, right? The city ordinance says you can't set off fireworks. No one's been taken to jail because of that. And I don't think the police have been trying either, to be clear. But this is certainly a decision the sheriff is making, right? The sheriff could have accepted this person. There's no state law prohibiting you from booking someone on an ordinance, right? People get booked on low-level things. To my understanding, this was a decision by the sheriff's office, and this is an internal policy that could be modified at any time, right? The sheriff is the decision maker here. In terms of, was Mayor Ted Wheeler truly caught flat-footed? I mean, I wouldn't underestimate him. We talked about city employees causing lawsuits. I mean, at the end of the day, human beings are imperfect, and sometimes you kind of forget to check that last little box, which is calling up the sheriff and saying, hey, is this actually going to matter, or is this entire thing of outlawing camping just grandstanding? And the sheriff is really striking a pretty bold point here, and one that I think is going to surprise a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. But the larger question rattling in my head is something like Julia just said, which is why the sheriff's office didn't raise this extremely crucial caveat in the entire very public process of the city getting this ordinance written up and vetted, because it was vetted through the county. And just to be like, oh, by the way, you can't use our jails. That would have been like a good piece of info. And I mean, if I were the mayor, I would wonder if it's not willful negligence or just straight up malice. Like at that point, I'd just be like, y'all hate me? Y'all hate this? like the fact that our city and our county can't agree on the basic definition of open booking is like, that is beyond problematic. And I don't care what side you're on, if you're, for or against the ban, we should all be united in annoyance with our city and county, just how they're acting with one another.
It is a really surprising disconnect, and I don't have an answer as to why. I mean, even the police generally don't want to waste time transporting someone in the back of their patrol cars if nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, and that was the thing also, is that, and this was from an article that one of your colleagues, Zaim Shaikh from the Oregonian, wrote, and he wrote that there was definitely some confusion with the police officers. Like the president of the Portland Police Association Union basically said, like, our officers require a clear understanding of what the responsibilities are in enacting law, policy, and directive. And he was like, I'm hopeful that in the coming days we can work together to ensure that the city and the county are aligned, meeting the needs of our community, which in my head was just like, mommy and daddy are fighting right now, but we're going to have dinner together. It's going to be just fine. And I'm like, yeah, I actually felt sorry for the police. They don't have a clear path. They don't know what they're supposed to be enforcing now.
Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of shocking after we spent so long, right, anticipating the Supreme Court decision, the Grants Pass decision, which cleared the way for the enforcement of these sorts of camping bans. And these, it was interesting. KGW actually did track down the man who was arrested but wasn't booked. They talked to him. According to their report, this fellow has lived in the same neighborhood for about 6 years. Some of the neighbors like him, some of them don't, but he told KGW that he's sober, that he doesn't want it, and that the police offered him a tiny home, and he actually said, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah. So, again, I haven't spoken to this person myself, so I don't know if that's all 100% true, but if so, it seems like this is someone who just kind of wants to be outside. And I mean, those tiny homes are not exactly condos in the Ritz, but if he actually did turn down a tiny home in one of the urban alchemy projects, that's pretty telling in itself.
Are you saying that he deserves to go to jail, Zane? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying we got lock 'em up Meza and soft one lost Starling here.
Oh my God. What is going on today?
What's so funny is that I actually agree with the sheriff. Like, I do. Like, of course I agree with the sheriff, what she's saying. But I also understand, like, the governance should work. And I'm like, this is terrible. This is a terrible idea on your part.
Yeah, Zane, to your point, I was thinking that as well. Like, what made it so that this person had no interest in going to these tiny homes? Like, what is the lifestyle there that's so undesirable, less desirable than living on the streets at this point? And where does that leave us, right? If the county is never going to book people for refusing that offer, and if the offer isn't good enough, then we're just at a standstill. And I don't really see where this is headed at this point. Like, something has to change.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously a desire for independence that would keep someone from wanting to be in the structured and, even in the low barrier shelters, right? It's not the same as having no rules. It's not the same as living in your own place and getting to do what you want. Maybe we just need to have a movie starring like John Wayne as someone who's not going to go into a tiny home so that people can understand the American sort of.
No, but here's the thing. We can't all just do what we want. That's not. We live in a society, Zane. I feel like every other roundup, I'm like, but we live in a society. Okay, so the mayor is ordering police to continue to cite people, who refuse shelter. That's where we're at. Julia, we're just like, well, where does this leave us? Well, Mayor Wheeler's just like, yeah, keep citing them. And an email to Police Chief Bob Day that was shared publicly, Wheeler said violators would be referred to prosecution in Multnomah County Circuit Court. Separately, a spokesperson for the mayor said that the DA, Mike Schmidt, had agreed to prosecute the cases, but a spokesperson for the DA's office, however, responded with, I don't know about all that. So that's where we're at.
Fabulous.
That is exactly how Liz Mira said that.
I don't know.
That was a direct quote.
Oh, man.
Yeah, another unsatisfying conclusion to a headline. Hooray!
Brutal. Mine's not going to be any better.
Oh, Julia, what do you got this week? What are you looking at?
So, I mean, at least stepping away from the law for a second here, my segment this week is all about what's going on with the wildfires in Oregon, right? And since everyone is talking about it, I've compiled reporting from all over, including the Oregonian, OPB, and Axios. And to start, I just want to lay out the scope of how bad things have gotten already this year. So our wildfire season started early this year. It was in April rather than June. And this is due to record-breaking heat and heat waves, which has just created very dry conditions across the state and makes things like lightning strikes and just human error in general way more likely to cause even larger fires. But at this point, 71 large wildfires have popped up in Oregon, which is significant because it's more than 3 times as many large wildfires as there were this time last year. And when I say large, I mean like 100 acres or more in timberland areas and 300 acres or more in grassland areas. But according to some reporting by the Oregonian earlier this week, in total, nearly 1.2 million acres have burned in Oregon this year alone, and roughly 1,088,000 acres are still burning. So it's just a visual to process all of what's happening right now across the state. But one of the largest fires that's happening currently is the lightning-caused Durkee fire in eastern Oregon, which by this morning it had reached 293,000 acres and was 58% contained. But that isn't the only fire that's reached that size. As of Tuesday, the Oregonian also reported a total of 5 100,000-acre-plus megafires currently burning across the state, which means a lot of firefighting resources are being poured into Oregon right now. And just to pause for a second, I do have a dumpster truck that stops by on Thursday mornings while we're taping. So if you hear some extra noise, that's what's going on. But
it's the perfect accompaniment for this Friday roundup.
It's so soothing for your Friday morning.
It really is. Go on, Julia. Sorry.
So as I was saying, Governor Tina Kotek did declare a wildfire state of emergency back in July, which was extended to October. And some reporting by OPB stated that the Oregon Department of Forestry, or ODF, and other firefighting agency partners have pulled nearly 10,000 firefighters from more than 20 states across the country just to support firefighters that are already battling fires in Oregon right now. So I'm going to pause there for a second because I just gave you a lot to take in. Yeah. What are some thoughts that are going through your mind, Zane and Claudia? How are you feeling about this?
Fires are bad.
I agree with Zane.
It's just devastating. I do have some information on things to look out for regarding travel around the state. So ODF's recreation program manager, Joe Offer, really is starting to kind of ring the alarm bells, talking about how 70% of wildfires are human caused. So staying informed is like a crucial bit in this. And that being said, almost 50 different popular hiking and camping sites across Oregon have closed indefinitely because of this. Wow. And there have been air quality advisories stated for much of central, eastern, and southern Oregon. Claudia, I know you recently went to southern Oregon, but Zane, do you have any trips planned coming up that you're going to have to cancel because of this, or do you know anyone?
Oh, geez. No, I know the Oregonian sent a reporter off to Vail and Westfall to cover these fires. Thankfully, I was hiding in the bathroom when they decided to volunteer someone for that. But I would say if you haven't seen our coverage yet, check out some of the amazing photos that Dave Killen, our photographer, took on that assignment. He's got photos of ranchers moving their cattle through these small towns to get out of the path of these wildfires. And it looks like something, again, out of the last days of the Old West, to see people literally doing steers herded through city streets in these small towns. Not something you see here in Portland. And I think that is, unfortunately, the reality of these wildfires, right? Is just that we often here in the metro area don't think as much about what's going on in the eastern half of the state, east side of the Santiam Pass. And the reality is that these wildfires can be devastating to the people who live in Malheur County, right, in Vail, a place that's in a different time zone, right, and does have a lot in common with Idaho, as they often will tell us. So luckily, I think it's nice that for the majority of the population, we haven't had the severe smoke warnings that people in Eastern Oregon are experiencing, but also that means it tends to get lost. And I know a lot of people probably aren't paying that much attention to what's going on this year.
I was about to say the same thing, Zane. I was like, I feel like Portlanders don't, unless their trip gets canceled and they're just like, we can't go to band, or like, or they go outside and they're like, like, we're just like, what? There's a fire? And there's something, okay, so this is really interesting, is I had a nightmare about this where I woke up, and it wasn't me. I was just like, I was literally some white dude. This was my dream. I woke up as a white dude in my dream.
This is your dream, Claudia.
This is my absolute dream. I cannot wait. No, this was in my dream, Zane. This was in my dream. Was I woke up as like some white dude in Eastern Oregon, and like 5 blocks away, I could see like all the trees on fire, and I had to think immediately what I was going to take from my house.
Oh, God, the worst.
And I looked around and I didn't know the house, and I was like, I don't know what's valuable to this guy. And then I just woke up like totally freaked out. And then I thought about myself. I was like, my dog, I take my dog. Jesus Christ. But I was like, really like, I can't even imagine what goes through your head when you see like a block. Because that's what happens sometimes. It's like 5 blocks away. You're like, that tree's on fire. I'm fucked.
Yeah, it's real. There have been dozens of homes devastated already by this fire. There was even a man who passed away who was in an airplane flying over trying to fight the fires. And he was 70-something years old with over 50 years of experience. And he passed away because of this. And people oftentimes end up in situations where they're seriously injured. So like Zane pointed out, although we may not be feeling the effects of it right now, things are happening that are truly devastating. And also the wind shifting and blowing all that smoke in our direction is entirely unpredictable. So things like the 2020 heat dome can happen at the drop of a hat without warning. So it is important to stay informed on that level as well. And I'll talk through some resources so you can kind of get a sense of where to start. So ODF recommends checking their website for fire danger levels and public use restrictions, which we'll link to in the show notes. But we'll also be sure to link a couple other resources related to fire and air quality watch compiled by our Hey Portland newsletter writer, Rachel. And I do recommend checking out those resources, but if you're busy and you don't get around to it, I want to put out a friendly reminder not to drive over dry grass when you're out hiking and road tripping for the rest of the summer, because it's a huge fire risk. And also something I just learned in putting this together, ODF requires anyone traveling on state forest lands to carry a shovel and a gallon of water or fire extinguisher in their vehicle. So please make sure to do that as well while you're out. I actually didn't know that. And I made the mistake of going out and about earlier this summer without that. So get that all prepared. You really just don't want to be that guy. There's so many resources out there. There's no excuse at this point.
Yeah, Zane.
Don't be that guy, Zane.
Zane, don't be that guy.
I stay safely within the confines. I don't go past 82nd. I will not be setting any fires this year or failing to put them out.
Oh my God. I love that I shared with you guys a literal nightmare where I was a white person. Anyhow, Jesus Christ. Real quick, our August guide just came out, and in it, John, our executive producer, shared how to make a cheap homemade air filter for wildfire season. I mean, on top of a bunch of other life-changing recommendations, I really feel like I don't think a lot of us have a ton of money to buy fancy air filters, but if it happens again with 2020, we should really consider, making one of these bad boys, and it's very easy to make. If you have one of those like panel fans, you know, like the stand-up panel fans.
Oh, the box fans.
Box fans, thank you. That's the word. It'll be very easy to make one of these.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Zane, I can't stop thinking about John Wayne refusing to go to a tiny home, and now all I want is him to recreate every one of our headlines. I want him to be the either the attorney who's suing the city, or more complicated, the officer who's being sued. You know, I want him to be the sheriff that refuses to
He's the
book.
lawman.
And then I want him to be the rancher who's just bringing in all of the cows while everything's on fire. So if you're listening, guys, just listen to it again with John Wayne in mind. And I think it might elevate the experience.
It'll make everything make sense.
Yeah.
It's John Wayne week here, and if there's a fire in my house, I'm saving CityCast.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our executive producer is John Atariani. Our producers this week were Julia Fiaioni, Francisco Kilgore, and Selena C.A. Reynolds. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, with contributions from Adrian Gonzalez. Our host is me, Claudia Meza, with original music by Jenny Conley and Steven Drizos, additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.